Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Steel City Underground, What the Football, we call it WTF, podcast. Thanks for listening. My name is Terry Fletcher. So we did take a season off, I should say I did, but I'm back and I'm pretty excited to talk about what the football antics that happen around the league. I do include, obviously, things that happen with the Steelers. After all, we are Steel City Underground. But it's fun to also take a look outside the box and see what everyone is doing. Well, I would be remiss if I didn't start with week one and the opener, which was on Thursday night, and the Eagles and the Cowboys, and the Philadelphia defensive tackle Jalen Carter. Well, before the first play from scrimmage, he decided to get in a scrummish, and he spit on, or towards, I should say, Dak Prescott. Well, what we didn't know is that it turns out Dak also had some spitting issues himself, but when you spit towards the ground and not towards a player, you don't get ejected or fined. But Jalen did. He got ejected in the first, I think it was 6 seconds, and got fined somewhere in the excess of $56,000. I think it was $56,266. And I wanted to know exactly, where did they come up with this amount? Well, that was a paycheck. So just so you know that it's actually a difference of paychecks and bonuses and things like that. So that kind of made a little bit more sense. I didn't like the fact that they said his suspension was that game, since he really didn't play the game 6 seconds in. But, you know, spitting is not okay. It's not cool. Don't do that. That's really off-putting, gross. But we also had the Chiefs and Chargers, where they were in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And believe it or not, who won? It was on Friday night. Well, the Chargers won. And people always say stun the Chiefs. You know, you can't really sleep on the Chargers. The only thing that I don't really care for is how much they try to overwork their quarterback and try to make sure that he's only throwing. We've seen that all throughout, different times that he's on the field. And it seems to me that they're really going to try to get him, into early retirement. I mean, Justin Herbert is a good quarterback. There's no question. But when you're throwing 55 or more times in the game, when you've got decent running backs, that's going to be definitely an issue. Now, Daniel Jones, now there's a story. He's the new Colts quarterback. He scored 3 total touchdowns, blew out the Dolphins, and if anyone wants to know who I think is on the hot seat as a coach coming early into the league, it would be the Dolphins coach, Mike. But 2 quarterbacks who swapped teams that also dueled pretty well, believe it or not, would have been Aaron Rodgers with the Steelers and also Justin Fields with the Jets. And it was a back and forth. It was actually a pretty exciting game. I should say stressful game. As a diehard Steeler fan myself, I was stressed the whole game. But later in the games, we did see that different games, Packers dominated the Lions with edge rusher and former Cowboy Micah Parsons in his Green Bay debut. And meanwhile, the 49ers came back to defeat the Seahawks on the road with a go-ahead touchdown, but it also hurt their quarterback. So now Brock Purdy's out for a while. We actually have quite a few quarterbacks out, but I'll get to that since I'm first starting with week one. And the Bills, oh my goodness, I was ready to go to bed. I was like, you've got to be kidding me, just get this going. But the Bills with the Ravens, I just can't go to bed. I can't go to sleep until I figure out what's going on. And the whole game, I'm like, the Ravens are going to win. It's unfortunate, but I thought they were going to win. And then the Bills came back after my fantasy running back, yes, he's on the Ravens, Derrick Henry fumbled, and it just changed the whole game. The Bills came back with MVP Josh Allen, and they pulled it off. They had a comeback win over the Ravens. I'm not sad. I'm going to say it. I'm not sad. And then when you get into some of the other things, you've got the Bears and what they're doing in Chicago. Then you've got J.J. McCarthy with the Minnesota Vikings. I really thought the Bears were going to pull that off too. But, you just look at that whole scenario. But J.J. McCarthy, he did help lead the Minnesota Vikings to victory, but now he is another quarterback that's out. We're going to start seeing, as we head into week 3, we're going to see 5 backup quarterbacks, and I'll get to that later. But, everyone says, what will J.J. McCarthy do for an encore after, that game? And he came back in the first quarter, to account for 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter in his NFL debut, which was great. But he did look lost most of the game. Now, that could be just me, just a little bit still salty over them getting rid of Kirk Cousins, who's sitting on the bench somewhere. But I don't know. I just think he's going to get hurt at some point, and you'll find out, yes, he probably did, as we get closer to week 2. The Bears with Caleb Williams, he started off with 10 straight completions, 86 yards, and then the offense just didn't do anything. So it was pretty much an interesting back and forth on that one. But the Buffalo-Baltimore 41-40, everyone's like, oh, Josh Allen did this, and then everything happened. Why doesn't anybody ever talk about the defense that got 40 points scored on them? Baltimore, what are you doing? Buffalo, what are you doing? You've got to be able to, stop the runs, stop the passing yards. If you've got each team on offense scoring 40 points, each team should win that game. So for me, for that game, the WTF moment was, how can you lose with scoring 40 or more points? Talk about a devastating loss. Now, Denver, Tennessee. Okay, that was weird. So you've got 20-12, and I'm not a fan of Sean Payton ever since of the headhunting gate or whatever that was a few years ago. But it's interesting because Bo Nix and the offense did struggle until the Broncos' run game finally helped them out in the fourth quarter. But it's going to be interesting just to see how Denver comes through when they're not in their own stadium, that balls sail. So who knows what'll happen there. The Titans with Cam Ward, the rookie, he's having a tough time. So, and they're just not using Tony Pollard as well as they should. So that's what I saw there. I thought, well, this team is basically, whenever you see them struggling like this, what do they call it? Rebuilding. They always call it that way. The Lions, boy, did they look terrible week 1. Green Bay 27 over Detroit 13. The offensive performance, I don't know. I just don't know. I don't know if everyone's sleeping. Everyone was just not paying attention. I don't know what was going on with Goff. I mean, I've watched the Netflix special, quarterback, and I just thought he was great. And then I come and see this, and I'm thinking, what the heck is that? So crazy. And then also you have then the San Francisco and Seattle game, 17-13, 49ers. And they were able to come up with that win, but how are they going to be able to sustain it? Brock Purdy's now out. George Kittle is out. Left tackle Trent Williams was in the blue tent. Fred Warner also had an injury scare. He did return, but he was definitely favoring an injury. Juwan Jennings, left shoulder injury. He departed in the second half, didn't come back. I mean, kicker Jake Moody, and he was 52% of his field goals, since week 10 of last season. And then what does he do? He misses a 36-yarder. Well, it's fair to say he's gone. So he definitely came back on Monday morning with a pink slip, and he did not travel with the team, and they brought in a new kicker. So I'm not really surprised there. I was surprised they kept him through the off season. I mean, there's loyalty, and then there's what are you thinking? And then the Rams, they came back in an interesting win, 14-9 over Houston, but it takes them a long time to get started. Now, I realize Matthew Stafford missed a significant portion of training camp dealing with a aggravated disc in his back, and we don't know how long that's going to be a possible problem, even though he's back to playing. But they need to figure something out, and hopefully their backup is a good situation. And then I'm going to skip some of the games that you probably don't need to know because they're WTF in themselves. Now, one quarterback that I don't know. I feel like he is a story that just keeps writing itself. And for me, that's Baker Mayfield with the Bucs. I mean, he comes in after Tom Brady takes them to a Super Bowl. He was, sent away or released from the Browns. And then where did he go after that? I think he went to Carolina, and then he had a totally crazy game, one game after being only there 4 days in LA with the Rams. And now he's found a home with the Bucs. And, their wins aren't necessarily pretty, but they close games. And, Baker Mayfield, he closes games. And I miss his progressive commercials, but he definitely closes games. So we'll see what happens with him as you keep going. But that guy, I don't know. There's just something about him that he grinds it out. Now, of course, good coming back to the AFC North, Cincinnati 17, Cleveland 16. And the Bengals offense, are they really doing enough? Now, sometimes they come out on the opening drive and they look pretty good, but then we just don't see where the play calling is very good. I mean, Joe Burrow, heading into the final 15 minutes of that game, and I watched it after, I went back and watched some of it after the Steelers game. He had only thrown for just 103 yards, his fourth lowest output in his career. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, two of Cincinnati's biggest offseason deals, were not even targeted that much. And just to bring up fantasy football, people with Jamar Chase were not happy. It was one of the number one wide receivers taken. And so, you just have to wonder what's going to happen there, especially now since the quarterback is out for 3 months with an injury that he has to have surgery on. When you get into turf toe, I know everyone's heard that with it, it's so painful, but when it starts to tear some ligaments and gets into grade 3, that's a problem. And then when you look at the Steelers, I know you've heard Joe talk about the Steelers for, a week now, and I just don't want to repeat too much, but 34-32, it reminds me of the Bills-Ravens game. Any team that puts up 30 points, you would think they would have a really good shot to win. And we played against a mobile quarterback, and our quarterback, who Aaron Rodgers, and everyone's pretty excited for that. We didn't get to see him at all in preseason, so I felt that he would have some rust on him. And luckily, we have what Mike Tomlin likes to call our stone cold killer in our kicker, which is Chris Boswell. I mean, he, to me, is the player of the game, almost in a lot of games that we play. And so he's just so impressive. But if the Steelers can't stop the run game, and I haven't seen it from week 1 to week 2, it's going to be a very long season. So let's hope that we're going to have some good things there. And again, I'm just still on week 1, so we'll see what happens there. Washington 21-6 over the Giants. They say that, and I saw some of the highlights, that Russell Wilson did not have a good first game. But I probably expect his second game will be much better. So we'll see what happens with him in New York, in the Giants. So we'll see what happens there. Vegas, New England. Now, Vegas won 20-13, and with Drake May, I mean, he was sacked twice, and he had a lot of pressures. I think at least a half a dozen times. And when they face the Chargers in week 2, that's going to be definitely a test. I don't see them winning that game, but we'll see. Because Geno Smith, to me, I think he's, if everyone says, oh, he's a top 10 quarterback. No, maybe top 20. I'd probably put him at 16, 17. And so for me, I just think that he's, respectable. I don't see it. So we'll see what happens the next week. But there's a Tom Brady issue here. Remember, Tom Brady is an owner. He is a percentage owner in the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm not happy that he is not only commentating and talking about other teams, but that he's also, what we found out this week, that he's in the booth and he is calling plays now. That's not okay. Not if he gets to be also, in meetings and talking to coaches and hearing game plans from other teams. That's a conflict of interest. I don't care what the NFL and Roger Goodell says about that. That's a conflict of interest. And I hope people are yelling loudly about that, because they just relieved him of some of the restrictions he has. And I don't agree. I think that he needs to pick a side. Either you are a media pundit now with your millions of dollars they're paying you, or you're a percentage owner of the Raiders. You can't be both. I just don't see that being, that's like saying I also own a betting site, so I can talk to my players about, throw the game this time. I know that's harsh, and maybe that's not the same for you, but that to me, that is the biggest WTF for me is, what are you thinking? What the football are you thinking by letting an owner put on headphones, not only talk about other teams, but talk about what they are doing right or wrong in a game, but then also call plays in the booth and put on headphones, offensively, which he did week 2. I don't like it. And then now he's going to go back to meetings. If I were an owner of another team, I'd be like, you know what? Get him out of here. So this is not good. I think this is definitely a problem moving forward. And so we'll see how that all plays out. Philadelphia, even though they beat Dallas 24-20, that was an ugly game. The secondary in Philadelphia, uh, yeah, it's not good. They were okay. I just think that Patrick Mahomes didn't have his greatest game. Jalen Hurts, he played okay. I know that week 2 he hurt his knee, so we're going to have some issues there. But you've got to tighten it up. You can't just rely on the fact that well, we've got talent. Well, you have talent, but you got to work on that. That talent, that game calling, that play. Otherwise, it's a real problem. So what's going on week 2? So in week 2, now coming back into the current. Sorry, I missed week 1, but I had to get that done, and then I want to talk about some of the WTF issues coming into week 2. So I just mentioned Tom Brady, and I'm really, the NFL, just thinks it's okay. They said there's no policies that prohibit an owner from sitting in the coach's booth or wearing a headset during a game. But Brady was in the booth last night, I should say, on Monday Night Football at the doubleheader we had in his capacity as a limited partner. Well, he just called a game from another team. That's not okay. Okay, I'm going to keep whining about that. Geez, that's not okay. So that doesn't work. So we'll see if anything really happens there, but it seems like they look at who he is and what he's done for the league and say, well, it's Tom Brady, so he can do whatever he wants. That's still not fair. You can't do that. So first of all, let's look at week 2, Thursday night. Packers win over the Commanders. I didn't think Washington looked that great, so we'll see how that kind of plays out as far as being a little bit different or better moving forward. I'm going to go backwards a little bit. So Monday Night Football, since it's fresh in my mind, Chargers 20 over Las Vegas 9. I told you. I knew that it was going to be a problem for Geno Smith and the Chargers. The Chargers came out, so the very first play was a deflected interception. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, the very first play from Geno Smith. And so the Chargers end up, I think it was on the 25 of their own part of the field, and they go, and what did they do? They made 3 passing plays. Why would you do that? You didn't even run it at all? What's with that? And they ended up having to settle for a field goal. And so we know you can throw. We know Justin Herbert can throw. But that was just the play calling. When I think of Jim Harbaugh, I'm not excited. He seems like he's got some serious ADD going on or something. I don't know. Just weird. They ended up winning, but to me, that should have been more of a blowout than the 20-9 that it was. Now, Buccaneers. This was a nail biter. This was the first of the Monday night doubleheader action. They won 20-19. So again, Baker Mayfield, he just gets it done. His fourth quarter comebacks, they said he is like number 1 for fourth quarter comebacks. They're 2-0 to start the season. They're just absolutely crazy when it comes to, okay, now we know what we have to do. And they are just a scrappy team. They pull it together. I mean, you've got a lot of all left, a lot of players out. All pro left tackle Tristan Wirfs is out. Chris Godwin, receivers out, and you just have you have some very new players also playing in the backfield, but it's just crazy how they tend to just pull things out. I mean, it was a last minute drive. It was at the very end that they did it, and we'll see how that plays out later. Atlanta 22, Minnesota 6. That's really the kicker. Parker Romo, so he's the one that replaced the kicker that was no longer with the team. So Koo is also out. He didn't travel with the team. It's interesting because I am seeing a lot of teams now saying, you're missing a kick to win the game. They're just pulling the trigger and saying we're bringing in another kicker because you have one job. You have one job. That's to get it through the goalpost. You can't do that, you're done. So Young-Ho Koo, his struggles are basically done, and Parker Romo came in and made 5 field goals and tied for the second most as a Falcons kicker. So he did a good job there. And, that's really how they pulled that off. It'll be interesting to see what the Vikings do moving forward, because it did look like they came in with some momentum that they may have won that game at home, but not at all. And they had a lot of injuries throughout that game as well. Philadelphia over Kansas City. Kansas City, the first time Patrick Mahomes has been 0-2 in his career since college. And now he's lost the last 3 games if you include the Super Bowl in there. Kind of interesting, I didn't think that Philadelphia looked the best on week 1, but they came back and definitely made a difference in this game. I think that Travis Kelce probably should have retired already. What did he do week 1? The what the football moment is he ran into his own player and knocked out Xavier Worthy. And so he isn't available for 2 weeks. And then a couple of balls got through his hands in week 2. It's just really sad to see when players get to a certain age and they don't know when it's time to hang it up. And so he needs to rethink that. I realize everyone wants to have him play because of the Taylor Swift situation, which I could absolutely not care about. But you've got to do your job, or if you can't do it very well, you've got to move on. Indianapolis 29-28 over Denver. So this was a crazy game as well. I saw this going back and forth. Actually, it was frustrating because it was on the red zone and we had to go back and forth. And I'm like, stop going back. I want to see what happens. And it was right up until the end. And I'm not sad about, like I said, I'm not a fan of the coach in Denver. But Daniel Jones answered, his any remaining questions about him, I should say. So after his week 1 performance, nobody thought he'd do anything on week 2, or it was just a fluke, but he absolutely, met the challenge. Actually, a sad thing for me, if I would have played him, and I'm in 3 of my fantasy leagues, I would have won my fantasy league, and I didn't. I actually played a different one, which I'm not going to tell you who it was. Different quarterback, but he did terrible and ended up leaving the game hurt. I should listen to my daughter. Shout out to Summer. She told me to play him. I'm stupid. So I'll play him next week. Arizona over Carolina. That was, just a fun game to watch. And then the Dallas Giants game. So because if you are a true Steelers fan, you are not a Dallas fan. I'm just saying, you're just not. If you are, then you haven't been a Steelers fan for very long. And how big of that victory for Dallas? We were definitely hoping that at least the Giants could kick them out. And this is where Russell Wilson actually had a pretty good game, but the 64-yard game-time field goal by their kicker on the Cowboys, Brandon Aubrey, that's what rescued them to go into overtime. It was absolutely crazy. I mean, this will probably quiet the talk of Russell Wilson being replaced with the Giants rookie Jackson Dart for now. So Wilson did throw a costly interception in overtime, but he was more efficient, more effective than in the week 1 loss. And it was vintage Russell Wilson, but he did make some mental errors that came back to haunt them in the end and for the loss. So we'll see what happens with that. But I have a feeling people are really going to start calling on the rookie to start soon. I'll just make a prediction now. I see Russell Wilson possibly being replaced by midseason. That's just my prediction. I have a feeling that's going to be something there. Boy, did Detroit come back, 52-21 against Chicago. Talk about, coming back from a really lackluster effort week 1. I mean, this was a total WTF moment. They just absolutely put their boot on the neck of that Chicago defense and just said, you know what, this is who we are. And their wide receivers, Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown, both had at least 100 receiving yards in that game for the second time in their career. So that was a pretty much a huge win after such a terrible loss week 1 for them. And so we'll see what happens there. Now in Cincinnati, okay, so we had Browning come in, the new quarterback or backup quarterback coming in to help out because Joe Burrow is going to miss 3 months. 3 months. Talk about a WTF moment. Remember, he is very accident prone. He went down in 2023 with a season-ending wrist injury. He's been out before. where he's needed surgery. He's been injury prone, so it forces him to miss games. But Browning was there before and led the Bengals to some wins. You just don't know how far they can go with that. And Chase Brown, the running back, was primed for a big season, but he's really struggled to get going through the first 2 weeks. So we'll see what happens there. But it's going to be really tough because of missing Joe Burrow now. 3 months is a long time. I mean, he might be back, they said, in December, but who knows? So their locker room is going to have to figure it out, what they're going to do, because 31-27 is respectable, but again, that means that the defense is going to have to figure it out. Okay, so I would be remiss and I would not be doing my podcasting job if I didn't talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the WTF moments. And I'm banging my head against the wall. You could have heard me screaming, sitting on my couch watching this game and thinking, how do people not know on a kickoff that the ball is live? It's always live. Everyone's like, well, this was a new rule. No, the new rule is where you take it out on the field. But, the Steelers defense just held the Seahawks to a 54-yard field goal with more than 12 minutes remaining. And then the mental mistake, they call it, by our rookie running back, Caleb Johnson, he basically let the ball go, and they say it glanced off his arm. I actually didn't see it hit his arm, but okay, let's say it did. It rolled into the end zone, didn't roll out. He started walking back towards the sideline, didn't make any attempt to field the ball live or even let's just lay on it. The Seahawks knew the rule. They recovered it, and just by laying on it in a blink of an eye, what happened? They got a touchdown because they were in the end zone. So that changed the momentum to the point where I was just like, you've got to be kidding me. Then Rodgers' first interception of the day came as he threw a end zone pass, and it was a hard one, but instead of connecting with Freiermuth, which was his intended target, and I think he could have caught it, we don't know, the ball ricocheted off an out of position Calvin Austin into the hands of Kendrick, so a defensive player. And again, they called that, as another interception, but that made a huge, turn. And the WTF moments of just not knowing your position. Now, what did Rodgers say about that? He said, Cal's the best kid, and I'm quoting, the best kid ever, but he probably should have just stayed in the flat there. That means stay in your lane. He's like, he knows it. Or he was kind of stealing it from Pat, or just catch it. But it would score a touchdown, put it away. It sucks because he's such a great kid. But again, this whole sequence changed the game by 14 points. It just, that the sway was just really hard to come back from. We ended up losing to Seattle at home opener, 31-17. And just think about that. 14 points, we could have won the game. That would have been, again, another over 30-point win. And so just those little things, they have to think about that. We're still not stopping the run. Kenneth Walker the third, he had 105 yards and a touchdown on 13 carries. We couldn't seem to stop the pass rush or the passing because Smith Najigma, and him and Sam Darnold, they talk about spreading around the ball. There's just nothing that we could actually do against them. So they were saying the week before in our win over the Jets, this was a teachable moment, things we have to do, but we're glad we won. This is not just a teachable moment. You've got to go back to the drawing board if you plan to do anything here, because if we can't pull out wins that are clean wins, it's going to be a long season. And just a reminder, our quarterback is 41 years old. 41. So you've got to make sure that everyone around them, we brought all these players in who are supposed to be quote unquote Hall of Famers, seasoned guys, and they're just not getting it done. Defense does not look good. So let's see what we can do. Let's see what can be, with Mike Tomlin, who does frustrate me at times, being the defensive mind he is. He needs to get involved. Special teams, he needs to get involved. I'm not confident in Terrell Austin anymore. It's the same old thing every time. We've got to figure out our defense, because we have the offense, but we've got to figure out our defense and make sure our special teams are very tightened up. Now, New England 33 over Miami 27. Now, I'm sure that there's going to be an issue with the coach of the Dolphins, because you just ask him questions after the game and people are like, what do you think you needed to do? And his quip, or what he says, is, oh, we just need to score more points. Well, duh. I mean, that's a stupid answer. But it's crazy sometimes when you get those. The Browns are being the Browns. They started Joe Flacco, and he was actually benched in the fourth quarter for their backup quarterback. So we'll see what happens on that one. But the Ravens came back. I don't like to call it a revenge game. I hate those. But they just came back after the Bills lost and said, no, we're winning this. And that did not surprise me at all. So you just knew that was going to happen. So this week, WTF, it's a lot of the quarterbacks out. We're going to see, it looks like Jalen Daniels, Washington, he's going to be out, the backup there. I think is Marcus Mariota. Brock Purdy's out. Then we're going to see just Browning for Joe Burrow. I think Carson Wentz is for J.J. McCarthy. And there is a fifth one that I can't think of off the top of my head. But the 5 quarterbacks, and we're only at coming into week 3, talk about WTF. This is going to be just a crazy week 3. So everyone, thank you for listening. Join me next week. Won't be quite as long because I won't have to do 2 weeks in a row. But these are the WTF moments under the Steel City Underground around the league. My name is Terry Fletcher. Have a great day.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.